What's up, influencers? Welcome to another episode of the VI Show. Today we're talking about making money as a YouTube business. And I've got a very special guest, James Dunne. He's a runner and content creator. He helps runners run stronger and prevent injuries. For over a decade, he's uploaded over 300 videos, accruing over 18 million views, and has been able to create a home-based business as a sports rehab therapist on YouTube. James is going to be sharing how he made $20,000 in just one weekend when he was still a fairly small YouTube channel. He'll be sharing that and his tips for you to create passive income as a YouTube business. All that and more coming up on the VI Show right now. That's right. Welcome to Video Influencers. We're helping build your influence, income, and impact with online videos. Sean and I started this channel to help you crush it on YouTube, and we're the co-authors of YouTube Secrets, the ultimate guide to growing your following and making money as a video influencer. Get a copy at Amazon, Audible. Always appreciate the reviews. How are you guys doing on this Saturday morning? And how are you, James? Thank you so much for being on the show. How's your weekend going?
Benji, it's a great weekend, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes. It's been nice getting to know you. I met you on Clubhouse. I saw your channel. I personally am a runner. I'm wearing my favorite marathon shirt right now in honor of your presence. But man, $20,000 in one weekend. I'm pretty sure just about everybody on the planet would be happy to do that. So without further ado, let's just get right into that. How did you even get set up to do that? I know that around the time of 20,000 subscribers is when this happened. Can you explain to us what happened before, the preparation, and how you were able to execute that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that was a hell of a weekend. That was one of those weekends where you kind of realize that the potential of what we're building here is really quite something. And it was, I think the first thing to put out there is it wasn't an overnight success. I think, Benji, you'll be very familiar with this kind of idea that a lot of people see these headlines and they think, wow, this is something that you could flip the switch and off you go. I started my channel and I started my website, which we'll be talking about both of those, in 2010. And yes, in 2016, I went through that process of launching a new product, and the only reason I was able to launch that product is because I'd spent the previous years, obviously not the whole 6 years previous, because there was a lot of learning, a lot of doing things wrong in that period, learn by doing, but spent that period growing an audience, importantly building an email list to really kind of collate that audience in one place, and then I had an audience that I could reach via email and ultimately position this product in front of. So we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it in a second, but it really started out with understanding who the audience is, understanding what value it was that I could provide to that audience, then over time just building their trust, getting in front of them many times, and then ultimately positioning this product.
Absolutely. And of course, you know, 20,000 seems impressive, but baby steps to get there. But what was the actual strategy? So I know that email is a big part of what you do as a businessman, and you were able to grow this huge audience and add value. Was there anything specific that you implemented that was different from maybe other launches before?
Yeah, so a couple of big things for me. So the first really was a bit more mindset on my end, and it was understanding that sending an email once in a while wasn't going to cut it, my email list. I know you and I have talked about email lists before, and we have kind of different approaches and probably different approaches for different lists as well. But I certainly saw the email list that I was building for my blog and my channel as really just another communication channel. You know, something that I didn't want people to unsubscribe from, and I needed to make sure that I kind of really looked after this well. But ultimately, anyone who runs an email list will appreciate that you're paying for all those email addresses to be hosted, whoever your provider is. So realistically, you need to make use of that email list and make it pay for itself. So I had to break through the barrier of saying, I don't really feel comfortable selling to this email list, and certainly not selling on a regular basis, and instead make a plan to have a specific window where I go from, to begin with, it's kind of Gary Vee style, you know, jab, 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 and then over one weekend, it's a ton of right hooks, and get comfortable with the fact that it won't be for everybody. It will put some people off, but you know what, if they're put off at that point, then they've they're welcome to unsubscribe, and they've kind of, what's the word? They've kind of self-select themselves not to be on the email list anyway, and that's not a problem. So for me, that mindset was the first thing to get through. The second was to really double down on the value that I knew people were already getting from the channel, the value that they're already getting from my blog. And we'll talk about how that all kind of pans out later on. Really double down on that, and knowing what the product is, which is a year-long strength and conditioning membership, essentially, for runners. Injury prevention, that's a big one. In that week preceding the cart opening for the program sales, I had a series of 4 webinars. So it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday cart opened, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday was the sale. Those webinars covered topics which were specifically led really by what I know is popular on the site. So runners are always told they need to work on using their glutes. So I did a webinar on how to use your glutes when running. Runners need to know how to engage their core. So guess what? We did another webinar on that. We did a webinar on fitting it all into your training plan. And then of course we did a webinar which is a bit more soft sales around talking about the product itself. So the webinars were all free. They were all specifically promoted to the email list, and they really kind of warmed people up to be ready at the point of the weekend to say, I'm either in or I'm out. And of course, either's fine, but thankfully, plenty of people said I'm in.
There you go. And you know, what's interesting about this strategy is it's something that people are implementing more and more today. A lot of people just call them challenges. And you did this a long time ago, you know, before challenges became a thing. The reason for me this makes so much sense is, of course, when you first start a YouTube channel, you want to start with search first, right? You know, small videos that answer questions for, in your sense, like, you know, great stretches to do before a run, or how to prevent injuries if you're training for a marathon. Those are like the short little bite-sized pieces, right? All the jabs. The webinars let you go deeper into topics. It's harder to create that long-form content on YouTube and get views, especially when you're first starting. Would you agree that this process of first adding value with these short videos that are informative help build that audience, and then once people understood and trusted your advice, they were willing to watch the webinars, which sold you even more before you even talked about a product, leading them to the final sell of this like much bigger course, and then them honestly being sold in a very positive way where it was a no-brainer to buy your product. And this is what led to that $20,000 weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It's working through that know, like, and trust kind of process. And if all I had was long videos like those webinars on my channel, chances are they wouldn't do overly well. Chances are they would never reach the kind of audience that those shorter videos managed to reach, and ultimately pull people into my, well, again, we'll talk about the blog later on, but pull people into my kind of ecosystem that got them onto the email list, which then had them ready to watch those longer videos. And like you say, those longer videos just did the job of creating the depth of connection with the potential, well, with the viewers, potential customers, which then obviously converted.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know I definitely need to work on my email list again, especially if I can make $20,000 in a weekend. And we're going to get into some of the strategies you want to suggest to people. But first off, I wanted to give some shout outs to some people here on the live stream. We got Professor Nez. What's going on? We got Mr. Camera Junkie. Chris was on last week's show. I want to thank some of the regulars like Sasha J, Razmin's Message from Spirit. Thank you for being here. You guys, we are going to be doing a Q&A a little bit later. If you're watching the replay, make sure you join the VI members only club where you get all the replays of the Q&A. And usually that's where we go really deep. So hit that like button, subscribe for more interviews like this with people just like James crushing it with YouTube. All right, James, so that was an amazing strategy. That was years ago. I know that you've continued to create content and you've got this home-based business, passive income. Number one, is it possible? And two, what's your tips for someone just starting out, or maybe they're like a year or two into their YouTube journey, to create that passive income? So maybe they're not relying on just these launches for like a quick grab of cash and have like predictable income.
Man, so many different directions we could go with this. You were just talking, or the panel were just talking on Nick Nimmins'
Yes.
live stream, talking about the power of search and the way in which, to begin with, especially when you're starting out with a YouTube channel, having a search strategy is a really good way to go. And I believe that one of the reasons for that, beyond just discoverability, is it allows you to create a kind of a baseline over time of evergreen content on your channel. And if you're managing to serve a specific audience with a specific set of values with that evergreen content, then there's a kind of a position in a niche that you can become known for. And if you're known as being the guy or lady who is really the top dog for X, Y, or Z in your niche, then that, of course, is a great start point for being able to then leverage that positioning, and not just have the free content out there, but also potentially paid programs, potentially consulting, potentially video courses, all those sorts of things. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit, to get into a bit more nuts and bolts, is something that I feel a lot of video creators actually neglect.
Yeah.
I believe strongly that if you're starting out and creating all those videos, you're doing your research to create a video on this topic, that topic, another topic, which have a focus on search. Therefore, you're trying to really optimize these videos and kind of get them to cover exactly what you need them to cover. If you're research, you might as well also start an accompanying website. And each one of those videos can also have an in-depth article, either pretty much just a tweaked transcript of the video with a bit of formatting and a bit of extra copy, or a video or a standalone article which the video prominently features in. But either way, if you start building up a very comprehensive and very specifically tied to one niche library of articles, then you stand a good opportunity of ranking in Google for these very similar search terms to what you're already going to be ranking on YouTube for. You kind of end up double dipping and getting double the benefit for the research that you put into that one video. And if you're doing that, then you're also in a position where you're going to find it easier to convert people onto an email list, because you're, again, getting people coming over from YouTube, especially if you're using really obvious calls to action, getting people over from YouTube to your website to potentially sign up to an email list, or people on those articles themselves being positioned, kind of content upgrades. So if you want to learn more about, for me, if you want to learn more about runner's knee exercises, click the button here, drop your email list, and I'll send you a PDF document for runner's knee exercises. That kind of thing does a fantastic job of growing the list. So once you've got the list, well, once you're in the process of building that list at least, then the world's your oyster, because you're already beginning to build the momentum around whatever the subject matter is that you're delivering value on. And if you listen to your audience, they'll pretty much tell you what it is that you need to make the product about. So for my audience, so thinking back to that big weekend in 2016, for my audience, prior to that, I was in two minds as to what it is I could realistically sell. Okay, so I could either do face-to-face or online, one-to-one, either way, coaching, which isn't scalable at all, or I could sell what I believed was already out there in bucket loads on the internet, which is information about this exercise, that exercise, blah, blah, blah. This sort of thing's really commoditized. There are so many channels kind of doing what I do. So I felt a bit weird about selling that. And then I realized that actually, and this wasn't my realization, I can't remember off the top of my head who actually said it to me, but the light bulb went off, or the light bulb flicked on, and it's not the exercises you're selling. People want your specific approach. People want your specific hand-holding. People want to effectively save time so they don't have to trawl YouTube, trawl Google, look at exercises on Instagram. They literally just want, this week, these are the exercises. I've chosen them for you. You save your time. You've got the structure. And it's really the structure that they're buying.
They want your specialty. They want your specialty, your whatever you specialize in. One of the things I love about your running channel, I love running. I've been running forever. Sean and I were going to be doing a half marathon this summer. The difference between if I started a YouTube channel versus your YouTube channel is you've got this long history as a sports therapist. So not only do you specialize, you have an expert like experience that I don't have that you bring to the table. And this is why I think the idea of a blog, it kind of solidifies that expertise, because, you know, we're all going to probably teach the stretches generally the same way. You might talk a little bit more about, you know, certain muscles and certain technical terms, but when you drive them to the blog, again, just like your webinars, long form content, it goes more into depth, things that I couldn't speak to. And then vice versa too. A lot of people can find the blog because they're searching Google. There's still a huge world out there that aren't searching on YouTube. They're searching on Google. And then once they get to your blog post, then they can kind of meet you and find out the personality. So it's interesting, the cross traffic. So specialization is the name of the game. What makes you different is going to make you stand out, especially on YouTube. Sorry to interject, but I think that the blog, it's interesting. We started a blog, James, my wife and I, for her beauty stuff years and years ago. And that was one of the things that made her stand apart. And because it was a normal transition, the beauty community were doing a lot of blogs, and then they started YouTube channels. My wife kept up on her blog for many, many years. She doesn't anymore, but back when she was first hustling, again, people loved that she could create a blog post along with her YouTube videos.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know what, it's all evergreen. That's the beauty of it. I
Exactly.
think for me, I don't really, like, people will disagree with me on this. I don't really bother with Instagram. Instagram for me is a direct message platform. Mainly I don't enjoy it. If I enjoyed it, I'd obviously have a different approach entirely and I'd go all in with it. But I don't like the nature of having to almost kind of feed the beast, if you like, with certain platforms, and constantly have new content, new content, new content. And yes, obviously consistency is important on YouTube, but the difference is, for me, whether we're talking about YouTube or whether we're talking about blog content, once it's out there, it stands a chance, any given piece of content stands a chance to rank for the rest of time. And you're building an asset, an asset that the effort you're putting in compounds. Upload after upload after upload, blog post after blog post after blog post. And that, for me, as a one-man band, makes a lot of sense in terms of where I'm using my efforts. So yeah, you might as well kind of double down on what's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck over time. And you know, just something I wanted to, sorry, Benji.
No, go ahead, James.
Something I wanted to just add as well is that the kind of the background of, before I even went online in 2010, already working with runners for years, gave me the insight as to what it was in terms of frustrations and pain points, in many cases literally pain points, but frustrations around, you know, doing the exercises runners actually have. So I knew, for me, that some of the things that I could lean on in terms of marketing material were the fact that there are so many options of things that you are told you should be doing on a week in, week out basis. Yeah. There are so many different exercises, so many different areas you should be potentially stretching, strengthening, that I could kind of distill that down into a program that kind of is a bit more of a coverall program across the base of kind of 8-12 weeks. So you're kind of hitting every area every 8 weeks across the course of a year. So I would like to think that for anybody, regardless of what niche you're in, if you're truly in that niche because you have the expertise, the experience, the background, think about the one-to-one conversations you've had. Although on YouTube you're trying to do one-to-many, think about those personal interactions, because those personal interactions will tell you a lot about the real deep psyche of your potential customer, as well as, of course, your potential viewer.
Boom, you guys. I hope you're taking notes. By the way, shout out to Sean. He's in the chat area. Give us a like if you found this channel because of Think, or you found this channel because of one of his amazing interviews. But okay, James, you talked about starting a YouTube channel, serving an audience, embedding that into your blog. So creating a blog post. By the way, side note, I do scripts of all my broadcasts, all my videos. That could easily be a blog. I mean, I should be doing this. But you're stacking, right? You're getting people from the Google side through your blog to your videos. You're getting people through the YouTube side to your videos to your blog. You've got this, you know, asset, as you said. You're growing an audience. What's next? What's the next step to be creating that passive income?
So from there, once you've got all these different aspects coming together and you're building that asset, like I said, it's all about building an email list and beginning to add extra layers of value on top of simply what they're able to find on your channel and in your blog. So I mentioned this earlier. I like to use content upgrades. So like I said in a given article, so I use the example of runner's knee. You could literally be reading an article on runner's knee. You can click a button where it asks you if you want to download a PDF for more information, and that gets you onto the list. Now, the way I've done this, or the way I do this now, and this is actually something I implemented after the big weekend we started talking about, is that once people come into my list and once they start receiving what they ultimately came onto the list for, so they get the download and the couple of emails that come with it, from there they start through a process, and depending on which kind of segment of the list they're in will depend on the length of the process, but let's say around about 12 to 16 weeks, where every week they're delivered a couple of emails which are specifically signposting them to some of my top performing content over on YouTube. Now, that is great because that, again, keeps people coming back to the channel and keeps people coming back to videos that I know perform well. And again, depending on the segment of the list will depend on which videos I send them to, or that top performing group of videos. And then later in any given week, there is also a call to action to get them to buy one of 5 different programs that I have on the website. So again, it's coming back to Gary Vee. It's again that jab, 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 right hook, but it's finding a good balance, right? Yeah. It's finding that balance that I feel comfortable with. And to be honest, I hope that they're comfortable on the other end, that it's a fair trade, that I'm delivering the value, and then boom, if you want this, it's there for you. Here's a discount. Normal service will be resumed on Tuesday when you get the next value video. And that works out really well for me. And as much as I'm not having the big weekends that came with the launch setup, here that we talked about right up front, where you kind of lead up to this massive weekend of sales, where it's great, but you can't do that too often in any given business. So think of that as a kind of a short and fat type big weekend. This is more of a kind of a long and thin approach, where we're getting a lot of emails sent, we're getting a lot of clicks, we're getting a lot of sales, but they happen at a steady rate based on the date and time that any given one individual signed up. So it's actually, from a business point of view, from a predictability point of view, and from a consistency point of view, it's much, much better, much less stressful. Because I'll tell you what, if you have a big launch set up and you're expecting to do X $1,000 on a given weekend and you screw it up, that's painful.
Totally.
So I'd much rather not have. Sorry, Benji.
No, I'm all about that passive income, and don't get me wrong. I think that, like my wife, she's got a product line called the JMK, and so of course we do like releases or big launches, but yeah, it's all about that steady sales coming in, and obviously all of this starting with evergreen content. So both on the YouTube site with videos that rank in search, as well as your blog on Google, because people are searching things and of course they find it. And then secondly, the email list. You build this over time. When Sean and I started Video Influencers, you guys know from the early days, we were building an email list for this book. So as we were writing the book, we were gathering your emails, building this community, but we started by adding value first. We weren't waiting for the book to come out to add value. This is the biggest mistake that I'd say old school business people make on new media, is they wait for them to create the thing and then they put out content versus putting content out right now. And this is what's great about creating a course, which, by the way, I think we haven't really talked about this a lot, James, but that's a third element. So you got the evergreen strategy with things that rank, you've got the email list that you're building over time, then the courses, and then the automation that brings all these together. And that's what's so powerful about evergreen content that ranks in search, because you make that video today and you'll get views for years to come. So sorry, I just wanted to put it all together for the viewers. Anything else that you would add, because I know we're talking about passive income from that strategy. Talk a little bit about automation and anything else that you want to leave with the audience for them to create passive income in their YouTube business.
Yeah, so a couple of things definitely. One big thing that I'll leave for a second, but before that, I want to just talk about if anyone's unsure about is it worth it to go down the blog route alongside with your videos. My videos around about, if I've got a strong enough call to action, I'll get about 1% people clicking over to a landing page and give me their email list. Give me their email onto the email list rather. With my blog posts, some of my top performing blog posts, I get around 18–19% of people who come onto that blog post through Google, then converting onto my email list. So because it's for me, the reason why that works is because there's one click removed from the process. You know, they're coming straight on there and being able to then sign up rather than having to go from YouTube to the website to then sign up. So it just makes it so smooth. So although the numbers and traffic can be a lot bigger to YouTube videos because YouTube has the traffic, and it perhaps a little bit more work to actually also add in the website side of things, it's, like I say, it's so worth it. But anyway, that's just a little bit of technical detail. The big thing, Benji, that I think you're talking about is the importance of recurring revenue. So you've spoken about doing courses and having particularly subscription model courses. And this is something that I've helped my partner, Holly, my fiance, Holly, actually create for her site. So she's got a channel, Pole Freaks. She's a pole dance instructor. And we've, again, across the, I don't even know when she started her channel, that was probably 2013, I'd imagine. But across the same kind of time period, we've used exactly the same principle, basically taking what I've learned on my main site and applying it to her side. And we've used Teachable to create a membership site. So she's got lots of tutorials and lots of different pieces of free content on her YouTube channel and on her website. Again, embedding one into the other. It's all the same stuff. Building the email list. And then the one layer that we've managed to kind of implement a layer on top of what I'm doing is getting people sold on that idea of signing up for a monthly or annual subscription to then have the kind of the really detailed tutorials, to kind of properly teach yourself to pole dance at home type content. She's got upwards of, where are we now? Upwards of, I think, 500, no, it's more than that, upwards of, I think, about 800 videos on Teachable, which, again, just go into such depth. And that, I mean, it's just, it's making my stuff look a little bit pathetic in comparison. So it's doing well.
It's always good to marry up, and obviously we both did that. But thank you so much for sharing all that, especially her wins on her YouTube channel. But of course, got to give a lot of credit to you, and you already were inventing the wheel, I guess you could say, and then replicating it with what she does. At the end of the day, I love that you brought up specialization, because you might think like you're starting this YouTube channel and you're just a copycat, or maybe you have imposter syndrome. But what people want aren't just specialization, they want you and your unique take. Maybe you are somebody that had injuries while running. Maybe it was difficult for you to get up and going, and so you can give a perspective that somebody else can relate to more than it can relate to me or James, and we're just talking about runners here. So even though a lot of that content that you might have on Teachable or you've got in your courses might be similar or maybe even the same as other people, it's going to be spoken in a different way. It's going to be communicated to somebody's specific problem or scenario. The circumstances might be different. This is why they sign up for you. And maybe there's cultural differences. So realize people have been doing the same thing over and over and over. It's just about how are you going to help that's a little bit different. And this is the beauty of both YouTube and social media. We can connect with specific groups of people that only us can relate to in a certain way, even in a niche that's very competitive. James, we're about to get into Q&A, but this will be the last part of the replay part of this interview. Any last thoughts when you think about somebody that's just starting out? They're going to have evergreen content. They're building their email list. They're going to have a platform with courses. They're going to have some level of automation. Because, one thing, this takes a lot of work, and a lot of people can lose motivation. Any thoughts there to inspire people? And like you said, it is totally worth it. But why has it been worth it for you?
It's a slow burn to begin with, definitely, and so many people do get frustrated to begin with. But I think what we were talking about a second ago of the beauty of YouTube and the beauty of a combined YouTube and blogging approach is that all the effort put in gets compounded piece of content by piece of content by piece of content over time, and you will over time begin to see that the speed of your increase in momentum, the speed of that acceleration begins to ramp up relatively quickly. It's all about just being persistent with it. And then once you're doing that, listen to your audience. They will tell you what they want and need from you. To begin with, you don't have that audience, and that obviously makes it a little bit harder. But as soon as you do, don't see a divide between you and your audience. You've got to be conversing with them and understanding what it is that they want from you, because if you can be the person who delivers that in your own style, then you're off to the races.
Boom. And I can tell you it is totally worth it. And another thing you see over time is exponential growth. So exponential returns. At first, you might make $1,000 in a weekend, and then maybe it's like a few $1,000s on that next weekend. And then you start combining the evergreen passive income with your big launches, and then it just gets crazy. And this is the beauty of a video that's evergreen, that keeps getting more views. Of course, you know, like views are views. So if somebody sees that your video has 10,000 views, 100,000 views, 1,000,000 views, that's authority that you're going to be building over time on top of your blog post. And this is why that cross-reference. So, hey, you guys, this is the end of the interview when it comes to creating passive income for your YouTube business. If you're watching the replay, make sure you join the VI members only club to see all the Q&As. So with that being said, let's move to the question periods.